What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers, certified sickos alike? I am Dan Favale coming at you, as always, with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We are wrapping up our offseason look-aheads for every team. We've already done 25. We're about to do the Southeast Division and do our final five right in time for the NBA draft. This will go out on the first day of the NBA draft, and a lot of the stuff will still be germane as we get into free agency and trade. So go check all those out. And just as the reminder, subscribe. Flood the comments. I have a question. Let's see if the prompts, I don't care where you listen. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, head to the comment section of YouTube. Give us your boldest prediction for the offseason that you actually believe. I don't want to say Luka Doncic is traded to the Pelicans or something, like something that you actually believe. So head down to the comments right now. I don't care where you're listening or watching this, and give us your boldest take for the NBA offseason period that you actually, again, believe. And with that, Mr. Hughes, how's it going?
It's going well. I think it's perfect that we're recording this one as close to the draft as possible, because the first team we're going to hit is going to be a relevant draft team, I would say, considering they have the number one pick. But we're not going to talk about much draft stuff because that's a great way to get this whole thing incredibly stale. But everything else.
What's your prediction on? So let's begin with the Hawks. Let's just go there. Who's your prediction on? Do you think it's just Zachary Risache?
Yeah, kind of. I think that feels like the most likely. I'm just just deeply underwhelmed by that pick, aren't you?
Yes, the right pick is Cody Williams or Ron Holland, I think, but they're not going to be brave enough to make it. I think I'd rather have Alex Sarr if I'm them than Risache.
I think so too. Boy, I watched some Ron Holland film finally the other day. I get it. I'm kind of sold. I understand the question.
Shout out Bleacher Report's Jonathan Wasserman for he should get a cut of his if he gets moved up in the draft after the next stage.
And to be fair, 75% of my open-mindedness towards Holland is because Was said he liked him so much. I'm I'm going to defer to someone who's spent several years watching this guy.
Not do anything to diminish our infatuation with Cody Williams, though. That was also notable. He wasn't he was you guys might have a point there. I don't.
It's we convinced the draft guy. Good job, us.
So I'll start us off with the Atlanta Hawks vitals here. But ironically, they're free agents. Saddiq Bey, he's restricted, but he's coming off that ACL injury. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. And then they have a team option on Garrison Matthews, which I would just pick up if I were them. However, their salary cap situation gets incredibly not complicated, but it's more complicated because they won the number one pick. It's a good problem to have, but they're just in the luxury tax right now by $1 million or $2 million. That is not going to stand. They're going to dump salary, whether it's part of a trade or if they're just trying to offload Clint Capella into someone's cap space. They will end up doing something like that. We can get into those machinations in a little bit. Their best spending tool, I think it'll end up being the non-taxpayer MLE, which as a reminder is projected to be at $12.9 million. Will they actually use it though? I have no idea where this team is going at this point. Jalen Johnson, he's extension eligible, a max of 4 years, $173.7 million, or 5 years and $224.9. It wouldn't shock me if he got the 4-year max. I know he's had some health issues, but I think people will be much like they were with Devin Vassell and Jaden McDaniels. If they agree to do an extension with Jalen Johnson, I think there might be some sticker shock.
I would have some, I think. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I would have some sticker shock there.
Trae Young is also extension eligible. The number to me is fuzzy. Bobby Marks, I think, had it written as 3 years and 157.7, but I can't get to that number. I keep winding up at 3 years and 165.8. Trae Young's extension eligible. That's all that matters. And he could sign for an additional up to 3 years. So where do you want to go with this team? That is the biggest question, just which, if either of Trae Young or DeJounte Murray, do you move? And what do you make of, I texted you this the minute I heard it, but on the Dunked On Prime podcast, Jake Fisher said that Trae Young is far more likely was the phrasing, to be traded than DeJounte Murray. So what do you kind of make of that?
I mean, the far more likely is a little bit surprising to me. And that's as someone that has kind of decided that I think if you're going to do anything consequential with the Hawks roster, it does need to be a Trae Young trade. I just thought that because Murray, the salary is so much smaller, the fit is easier. You're not changing your whole team if he's on it. You might have more suitors. And so that would make him pretty likely to be traded. But I guess what I take from that is that Atlanta is serious about, we want to be pretty fundamentally different team because trading Murray doesn't do that. I don't think, certainly not to the same degree as trading Young does. So that makes it interesting. And also just in general, it's kind of wild that the team with the number 1 overall pick in the draft, like that fact is like, no, it's not something I'm thinking all that hard about for their offseason, because there's this other looming like bigger change, right? Like I think that's a pretty rare place for them to be.
Well, it's super unique in two ways, because they were just trying to win this past season and ended up with the number 1 pick. And then also you view it as, okay, they should either move this number 1 pick to go get immediate talent to then help them to continue to win. But this draft doesn't have that kind of value. And quite frankly, the Hawks aren't good enough to punt on it. But then you would view it as, well, why not just kind of strip it down and rebuild? And you can't really do that when the Spurs control your draft picks in 25, 26, and 27. The 26 one is a swap. And so I come at it from the perspective of, I actually think it's more likely they wind up keeping both Murray and Trey than trading Trey, because I do think he's a more dominant player. I think you could also make the case that Murray's worth more in the current trade climate because his contract is just so easier to maneuver, and it should wind up being a bargain as the salary cap rises by projects to be 10% each year. But there's also the school of thought, and I believe you're one of the people who subscribe to this, that you don't actually believe that moving Trey Young forces you to go into some kind of rebuild. You could argue if you keep Murray and reorient around him, whoever you take at number 1, some of the players that are still there, Jalen Johnson, that you're as good, if not better off.
It's just like I think it's like I don't know we have like 4 words to describe how you like start over with a team. Is it like a reset or a retool or a rebuild? Like whichever of those you want to use. I don't think moving Young forces you to be like, oh man, this thing's down to the studs. Like we are starting all the way over. And like, it will change by definition. Trey Young changes how your team plays because he's on the ball all the time. Everything runs through him. You have the defensive issues to make up for. Like you're just building a certain kind of team. We talk about this with Zion a lot. Like you're building a certain type of team around Trey Young in ways that like you don't have to be quite as particular with some other guys. Like with him, it's just there's this set of boxes you've got to tick if he's going to be there. I think if you move him, this is the complicated thing though. You said it, like they don't have control of their draft. So like there's so much appeal in the idea of trade Young for as many firsts as you can get. And like, how the money coming back has to be significant. I don't know really how you work that. And then use the number 1 pick and then like, oh, we're starting up, but like you don't have your picks. So bottoming out is kind of, unless you get really
make that trade with the idea of you're as good, if not better off immediately. And you've just sort of restocked some of your draft cover if you want to go out and make a subsequent trade.
Now. So I don't know what I think about this. I think it's worth having a conversation about, like, do you think that it's like unreasonable to, as the Hawks say, we're going to trade Trey Young without being specific about what we're getting back? We could be as good, but like in a different way. Is that a plausible thing, or is it just you trade Trey Young, you're worse in your
mind? That's where I land, because I still think Trey Young is really good, if not underrated at this point. And I do think, okay, during that stretch where Murray was kind of running the show, the defense was better and the offense was like fine. But over the course of an 82 game sample size, I just can't shake the fact that you were going to miss Trey Young, especially if you want to incorporate the number 1 pick. He is someone who, he forces them to develop off ball, but that's what Zachary Reese should be doing if that's what they end up picking. That's what Alex Sarr should be doing if they end up picking him. So I think he streamlines that development for them. I'm also like, I understand Murray and Young aren't the best fit, but like at this point, you don't just trade Murray to trade Murray, because you don't have your own draft equity. If there's a chance you end up worse on the other side of a Murray trade, there's no point in doing it because of So if you can get some of your picks back from San Antonio, and I do think to Atlanta, the immediate ones technically I would think have more value, because then we control it right now, and then we can be better by the time these other ones convey. That's really that. And that's the circumstances under which I would consider moving Trey Young, is if San Antonio came calling with all of their own picks coming back, and then there has to be other stuff involved in there, of course. So that's like the only scenario I think in which I would move Trey Young.
Yeah, even if that's bad money, like the Spurs are like, it's going to be Zach Collins' contract and whatever else we need to get.
Have bad money besides if it's Zach Collins and Keldon Johnson, done. Let's all these picks.
You might get Keldon Johnson out of it, who's actually a pretty decent fit on that roster.
What do you view though? And I guess it's kind of tough. We don't know who they're going to draft at this moment, and then you don't know what they're going to get back in a Murray trade. But you look at this team. What is their biggest needs? Assuming that. I think I would operate under the assumption that whoever of the guards that they keep or move, they're still going to be like kind of in the same territory. I wouldn't expect them to be much better off, but they're not going to be looking to undergo. I'd be shocked if this ends up with them like totally rebuilding. Again, I think it's if San Antonio wants Trae, we'll give you all your own picks plus other stuff.
Yeah, I think so too. I think what they need is like, well, frame it this way. Look at the teams that were in the finals. Like they're just loaded with combo forwards and big wings and versatile guys that can defend. And the Hawks, like they have DeAndre Hunter. He just has sort of not been as good at that role as they hoped. They need those types of players. Jalen Johnson is, I guess, kind of that way too. But like, especially if you're going to go forward with like Young and or Murray and a conventional center, whether that's Capella, who, by the way, I think the reporting lately is like Capella might be someone that moves if they're trying to get under that tax line, which makes sense because they have a Kongwu. But you need some guys in between your smalls and your bigs that are two-way players that can make catch and shoot. Just three. Surprise, surprise. You need 3-and-D wings. Like that's what the need is to me.
And you could end up needing a guard too if you wind up moving any one of these. So free agents, let's bring to mind before we wrap up on them here. Markelle Fultz, again, if Murray or Trae Young is being traded, Chris Dunn, Derek Jones Jr. would be good on. Like I would lean all the way into defense. I'm not even concerned about what is the offensive spacing like, but Derek Jones Jr., Najee Marshall would be great. Hayward Highsmith, Kyle Anderson could be interesting on this team again, depending on if they wind up trading one of their guards. Javonte Green's a name I've always liked. Torrey Craig is a player option. D'Anthony Melton could work. Dennis Smith Jr. We're obligated to mention both him and Chris Dunn for any of these teams. In terms of trade targets, I do think it matters. Like it depends on who you're sending out. But like I'm not trading Trae to Brooklyn unless I get Mikal Bridges. That's not happening for me. It would be interesting if Orlando just comes calling for Murray or even Young. Can you get Jalen Suggs? I think no for Murray, but would they for Trae? I'd probably still say no, but that would be someone who'd be interesting. Brandon Ingram, Dorian Finney-Smith, Kyle Kuzma, Ayo Dosunmu, Javon Carter, Dean Wade. That exhausts that's the clip of targets I have for them.
I mean, you named them all. I don't have any. I was going to say Kuzma.
It varies because I wish we just knew the outcome of the Murray Trae thing, because then that dictates what kind of direction they're headed into.
Right. Yeah. The thing is, like, this is probably going to crystallize fairly quickly because they're going to make the pick and then it won't be long. I don't think, if they're going to make a big trade, I don't think it's one that's like, oh, it's going to be August or like this is going to happen. I think within, the first couple of days of free agency, I would imagine. And then it'll be a lot easier. What's that?
I think I agree with you.
Yeah. All right. Good enough for the Hawks. That was a lot to cover. Charlotte's next. So notable free agents: Miles Bridges, Davis Bertans. He's got a partial guarantee, $5.25 million of his $16 million. I'm not sure the date on that one, but assuming it's late June, not super important. That's another salary that's like you can mess around with that and make it more or less valuable if you're trying to swing a trade. But this is is Charlotte going to attach a pick to a larger chunk of Davis Bertans' salary to go get someone? Probably not. He seems like someone that you would trade.
And this will probably get into the Miles Bridges discussion, but you could just guarantee his salary. And if you're looking to take back bad money, because and just operate over the cap, and then you just have this massive expiring contract that would allow you to take back a sizable contract that is attached to picks or prospects.
Yeah. No, I mean, kind of a sort of similar, but to Bogdanovich in New York, except the Knicks would want very different things, I would imagine, using that full guaranteed salary. Not any like big time extension eligibilities here. Cody Martin, JT Thor are eligible. I don't imagine there's a lot of urgency to get that done. This is a team in a rebuild, new coach, new front office, relatively new ownership. So as you're looking at first of all, this establish a direction, decide what you're going to do overall here. It seems like it's fairly clear it's going to be like we're rebuilding, we acknowledge it. But what do you view as this team's biggest needs going into the summer?
I mean, I've got a laundry list of them: shooting around LaMelo and Brandon Miller, a backcourt running mate of the future for LaMelo, unless you're thinking that Miller's the 2, in which case then you're going to need like another dynamic winger combo forward. Honestly, wouldn't mind seeing them. I don't know who will still be available when they're on the clock, like if for the draft, but like a big man upgrade for Mark Williams. I know he was injured last year, but I don't know if that's like, is he cornerstone material at the center position? We don't know enough. He's not someone that I'm planning around though. I have Miller and I have LaMelo, and those are the players I'm planning around. So like, and like you have Grant Williams and Nick Richards, like those aren't names. And then just really plus defenders at any position. If you had to dilute it down to what you think their actual biggest need is, knowing that they're really at the point, kind of like the Wizards, of just talent infusion is just what they should be after. But what would be like no, they should prioritize this.
Yeah, you got me. I was going to cop out and say just best player available at all times, maximum talent
I know you too
acquisition.
well.
Like,
I was like,
yeah, you
generalize the shit out of
took
this.
that club out of my bag. That's my favorite club for a team like this. Well, so if you're going to keep LaMelo, like I know that we've increasingly been viewing him as someone that a lot of teams should be targeting as a trade target.
You know what it is? Because I just want him on
Yeah.
those. It's not that I actually don't think Charlotte should move him. I want to make that
Yeah.
clear. I wouldn't.
That's not what I'm getting from all of your hypotheticals so far. I think you really want him to be on.
I hate the Hornets. That's
Yeah.
This is a Lakers only podcast. So
What's their biggest need? I mean, if you believe that LaMelo and Miller are kind of your 1 and 2 in some order, which is like not a ridiculous. LaMelo was an all-star when he was 20. Brandon Miller was way better than anybody, or even most people thought he was going to be as a rookie. You should feel pretty good about that. I guess it's probably like, it's got to be a front court presence, right? Like whether that's a combo forward or a big guy that can do more. Like say what, Mark Williams, Nick Richards, like those guys are pretty good versions of the type of centers that they are. But I do think like you have to be great. You have to be like incredibly good to be like a paint bound, role guy. Like, I don't know that there's a whole lot of difference. In fact, it might be the case that this other guy's better between like them and like Daniel Gafford. Like Gafford's just better than those two guys. And even he is like, well, Lively is the real center in Dallas. So like, I would be looking to change the type of center and type of front court guys that I have. I guess, but that's almost by default, right? Because you believe in LaMelo and you believe in Miller, and you get another wing in there, and those positions are sort of accounted for.
I think I would just say shooting, because then it's like, okay, can that be? Do you view Brandon Miller as your 2 or your 3, or is this? And that's just like imagine if I wish they could trade up and get Reed Shepherd on this team. You know how frenetic Miller, Shepherd, and LaMelo would just be as a trio. Yeah, that'd be fun as hell. I do think a lot of what dictates this though is Miles Bridges, who Jake Fisher threw out the number of like he could get $30 million a year, and I was like, RIP to that team's cap sheet. Like this, I'm off court stuff aside, and I will recognize that maybe the domestic violence incidents have colored my view of him, which I will not apologize for. But this is a dude who's not shot 35% from 3 in 3 seasons now. Granted, he sat out, but so his past 2 seasons that he's played, and he's more concept than practical on defense. Like this isn't like someone who's he's malleable, but he's not like a great defender. That was PJ Washington would always handle the heaviest burdens when you're looking at like how their front court ended up panning out. So if you're them, are you just re-signing Miles Bridges to preserve the asset, or are you either one aggressively trying to get him to work with you to do a sign and trade to somebody, or are you okay just letting him go?
I don't think you can let him go, as much as that would earn you a bunch of plaudits in the on the PR side of it.
NBA Twitter coming together to celebrate the Hornets,
right? Yeah, it's like, oh, look at it, and then when the Hornets are like asset poor, it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't have let someone go that you could have traded for something. Well, the same people will say that stuff.
It'll be me.
Yeah, right. Stupid Hornets. Where's your moral high ground gotten you now? I think I might just try to sign him with the idea of asset preservation in mind, but like that doesn't, if that's your approach, you can't just sign him to anything. Like it can, because he's got to be a value on a team that you intend eventually to trade him to. And as you look at his numbers, try this on. I wonder, because he had a 40% 3-point shooting season in 2021, and he's in the like lower mid 30s otherwise. I kind of wonder if like a lot of that has to do with he's been overtaxed. He's like asked to take too many types of threes that like he's not good at.
You figure all the time LaMelo missed too, like that's not making his job any easier.
Not making his job easier. So if he's someone that you slot in as like a 4th option, I think maybe you see that 3-point percentage come up to where it's like, oh, he's a weapon again. And maybe sorry, I know for the millionth time, like PJ Washington got better when he got around a different set of players. Like maybe that's the case for Bridges, or at least it allows Bridges to, avoid having to do some of the lifts that he's like not as adept at.
I'm going to throw some teams at you, and some of them are cap space, or it would have to be a sign and trade. Does he make sense in Detroit?
Yeah, kind of, right? Like I mean, as an
athletic, some pretty like big perimeter lineups with him and Asar and Cade, but the shooting on those could be shaky unless you think that having Cade there will improve.
And if the theory is he can be more on a better team where he's asked to do less, I don't know if Detroit is like the
for that. Philly, they strike out on like all their. I mean, they've already I don't know. They've been linked to every single free agent
Yeah.
under the sun.
I mean, Philly could just sign him for like 20 to 25 million a year and have room to do other stuff, right? Like, and then he's no higher than the third option, just with Maxi
Yeah.
Embiid and then him. So that fits. I think compared to Detroit, I like that better.
Are there any like teams that would have to? They don't have cap space. They would have to sign and trade for him in that vein. That would make some sense here. Like because I go through it and it's just I don't necessarily love his fit with any team. I mean, like there are probably some super tax teams that I would be okay. That makes a ton of sense, but that's just not like you can't acquire a player via sign and trade like that. So I mean, do you know where he might make some sense? And again, we're not condoning the off court stuff here. If the fan bases don't want him, I totally get it. He probably make a lot of sense in Toronto at this point.
Yeah, just to fill in the combo forward spot. I guess he played next to Barnes with Pirtle. I think a lot will if that's again, the thing again is like the shooting has to be better for a lot of these fits to make sense for him. I'm just looking around like if Chicago did offer the qualifying offer to Pat Williams.
I don't mean to make this about Chicago. Did you see the report that their ideal plan now is to move Zach LaVine, move up in the draft, and then re-sign DeMar DeRozan? What fucking timeline is this team operating on? That's the most confusing. If that's the actual blueprint, that's the most confusing thing that I've ever heard in my entire life.
It's all the timelines. They're going to do all of them and just see which one works out.
Sorry, they continue to fucking.
They do. But yeah. Chicago, if Patrick Williams leaves, like there's kind of a spot there. You're not signing him, obviously, if you're the Bulls, but I'm just trying to think of places where
Memphis.
Who needs an mainly offense first 3/4 that you're also not sure is worth, being a second or third. It's a weird fit. I mean, but again, I think it was Jake Fisher or it could have been someone else, but that was like Bridges was getting the max before all this shit happened. Like he was a guy league wide where it was like done. Maybe it's Charlotte, maybe it's someone else, but he is going to get the max.
I was in the bag for his step back three at one point. Like
that's the thing. Like he's got a 40% 3-point shooting season. Yeah. It's an outlier, but it happened. And he's an 80+% free throw shooter. That's where I'm like more optimistic that if you just tweak the shot diet, maybe he is a plus shooter again.
This would be a wild one. What about there would have to be other stuff involved, but like a Jared Allen for Miles Bridges trade type deal. The fact that Kenny Atkinson's in Cleveland, and Grant and I will go in detail on that, Scotty Barnes and stuff at a later date, makes me think that they're going to keep Jared, like they're going to keep everybody together.
Yeah.
But that would be like sort of interesting. Or is that too offensive focused when you have Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell?
I mean, it is offense focused, but again, it's like the same thing all the time with Cleveland. It's like, well, if they're going to ever be any good, it's because Evan Mobley is a defense unto himself, which like he's been, I mean, what was he second in DPOY a couple years ago? So, I mean,
I would say if Sacramento was looking to kind of like not go the Zach LaVine extreme where it's we get a little bit of an offensive punch and this guy will be better on defense than Zach LaVine, that could be an interesting fit.
I agree with that. And they got 3 picks, 3 future firsts, not counting their pick in the draft, 3 swaps. Like, I mean,
I'm not. No,
you're not doing any of that. But I'm just saying they can, if you're trying to sign and trade him or whatever as Charlotte, like
you have Kevin Huerter and Harrison Barnes is like, if that, I would just use those. Like if I'm Charlotte, I would like Kevin Huerter, which might be better to move off the Bridges. Do you have any like other questions about this team before I just rattle off the targets?
No, go ahead with the targets.
So it depends on how much cap space they're going to have, but we'll get to the free agents first. This is just names I've been thinking of. Gary Trent Jr., Malik Beasley, Luke Kennard has that team option with Memphis. Najee Marshall, of course. Simone Fontecchio, that would be a fun fit. Bruce Brown, I don't think Toronto declines his team option, but if they do, Isaiah Hartenstein, if they get rid of Miles Bridges and like they just have cap space, Isaiah Hartenstein would be a great fit here. He's only 26, by the way. Patrick Williams, if they want to throw kind of an offer at him. Now, if you want to take like sort of a flyer, Chuma Okeke, I don't hate, like just to stab in the dark. Isaac Okoro, Max Christie really ruined the Lakers head coaching hire with JJ Redick. He came in to develop Max Christie and then just try and pay him so the Lakers can't. Markelle Fultz, Nick Claxton, DeAnthony Melton, and then trade targets, Anthony Simons, Jalen, if you're going to trade LaMelo, I would target trying to get somebody like Jalen Suggs out of that deal. Josh Green in Dallas, is that someone you could just get at this point? I like both Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga here. So like, what is the Warriors' plans for them? Duncan Robinson, Jonathan Isaac would be super interesting. And then we already mentioned Kevin Huerter, but I had him on the list before we got into that discussion.
If you're talking Kings trades too, and like if the Kings are willing to make it a more pick heavy offer, you could just go Kevin Herter and Trey Lyles. If you're talking about Bridges as a sign and trade guy, maybe, and like,
Would you prefer Davion Mitchell to Trey Lyles if you're Charlotte? Just because
well,
you have
Lyles gives you the semi like stretch five thing. He's undersized, but the Kings do use him that way most of the time. So that's a new element you get. But then Davion, I think, as a guy you can just play with ball and say like go guard the guy.
And
that
also, if you have is Trey Lyles that like the way Grant Williams played for them last year? Like is Trey Lyles that? I mean, I agree with you that Trey Lyles is definitely he's gonna have more size at that position than Grant Williams.
Just a little bit, but that's a fair point. That like I don't know if he's offering you like that much that's different from Grant.
I like that. Call it in. I mean, I don't love the Miles Bridges fit in Sacramento, but if the alternative is trading for Zach LaVine, I like the Miles Bridges fit a lot more. I'll tell you.
And if Mikal Bridges is not available, who is like the guy that
I do kind of think he ends up being back though, and I don't think this team ends up being like a huge cap space team, which will make this summer a little less interesting.
If free agency landscape were a little different and there was like, oh, there's way more we can do with that 30 million, then maybe, but I just think Bridges and whatever he gives you on the floor and then whatever you can trade him for seems like slightly more valuable to me.
Would that be their best outcome is to sign and trade Bridges because then they technically get to take the moral high ground, but they get assets in return too? Or is that not, is that like,
I mean, I don't know if you get total like moral high ground that way. Cause you did technically like, I don't know if it's an immediate sign and trade, probably more so than you sign him and then you move him at the deadline or something after like didn't work out and you actually did want him. A little different. Yeah. Ready for Miami?
No, I mean, this team is depressing for some reason, but notable free agents. Caleb Martin has a player option. Haywood Highsmith, Kevin Love has a player option. Josh Richardson coming off an injury. He has a player option. Thomas Bryant has a player option. Patty Mills and DeLon Wright are non-bird free agents. Their salary cap situation at a glance is disastrous for a team that was just not in the postseason. They're less than $4 million from the first apron and then subsequently less than $15 million. I have them from the second apron. That's without new contracts for Caleb Martin or Haywood Highsmith. And I'm assuming Love picks up his player option in this scenario. So like, there's just a world. I've been phrasing it this way, and it might not be perfectly accurate, but I've been calling it, they are one Caleb Martin contract away from being in the second apron. Mm-hmm. And that's unsettling at best. Right. So their best spending tool, I just have it as minimums. Notable extension eligibilities, Bam Adebayo, 3 years, $165.8 million. I'm absolutely offering it. I'd be curious to see if he would sign it or if he prefers to wait another year. And then Jimmy Butler is eligible for, it's either a 1 year, $59.7 million extension, I believe. And that's if he doesn't decline his player option. If he declines his player option, it could be 2 years, $112.9 million. And it's so short because of the over 38 rule. So this team is like, my biggest question for them is, do they even have a pathway to making a real upgrade, just given their cap situation and now the assets, because you gave up that first round pick for Terry Rozier? Or do you actually view this as, okay, look at who finished the season healthy, and it was basically nobody. Like even Jaime Jaquez wasn't healthy by the end of it.
I kind of think that the Heat can make moves that improve their like 3 to 5 year outlook, but I don't know if there's a way for them to make themselves like meaningfully better in 24-25, if that makes sense. Because like, and what I'm like brushing up against is like, if you do trade Butler and you get that 50+ million off the books for, as you know, really there's only this year coming up at 48. And next year is a player option, I believe, at 52. Mm-hmm. Like, which we talk about this with Donovan Mitchell all the time. Like, oh my God, you can't let him get to basically expiring status, next year. Like, sort of the same thing with Butler. So if you move him, you clean the books up a touch. Like maybe you get some assets back. You have ways to build the roster after that.
I was going to ask you, one, do you like buy into the fact that it could head down that path? But two, just given what this team has done and the fact that I think Pat Riley turns like 95 or something soon, are they actually going to prioritize, like, we're going to clean up the cap sheet and get picks back? Or are they going to like, no, like we're going to, even if they get assets, they're going to turn around and make another trade?
No, that's the thing. I think so. They can set themselves up to be better positioned for several years after this. I don't feel like it's that's likely for this team and this like front office, just for the partly because of the reasons you said, and also because Miami tends to think like, other than like the decision, it's not like Miami tends to operate, like let's look a couple years down the road and get ready. They're just like, how do we win today? So that would augur against a Butler trade. But I do think it is possible that it goes that way, to answer your question, just because like the financial realities of it, his availability, all the stuff Pat Riley like very like unabashedly talked about with Butler. And then if you kind of mix in some just like nascent, dissatisfaction on Butler's part, and like maybe that relationship gets a little fractured. I'm probably reading way too much into it, but like that I think is what precipitates a trade, not so much Miami saying like we really like to get ourselves set up for 2027. I don't think that's going to be the motivating factor for it. What do you think?
No, I think that's the perfect way to frame it. I think you just hit it spot on. It's like it's not going to get there. Like the Heat aren't going to be proactive about this. It's going to be a reactive thing if he winds up on the trade block.
Well, so then what? Like, how do you make this team better?
What actually worries me more is I'm receptive to the idea like Caleb Martin could be better. He didn't have like the best year by his standards. And then you could just be healthier. I know Jimmy Butler's always going to be dealing with stuff, but like the Terry Rozier injury by the end of the season, that's not something you anticipated. Jaime Jaquez, of course. So like you could just be Tyler Hero. Like you could be healthier. And then some of those, basically all of those guys, Caleb Martin could be better. He's older, but he could definitely be better than he was last year. Jaime Jaquez is going to get better. Haywood Highsmith is going to get better. Nikola Jovic is going to get better. So you have Tyler Hero is going to get better. He's at least not going to get any worse. And he's, by the way, I still think I don't think he's like on the same level as a Tyrese Maxey, like blue chip Anthony Simons prospect even, but like Tyler Hero's good. This idea that Tyler Hero sucks is just weird.
He and Jordan Poole.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but my concern is there a chance that you lose two of the guys I just named in Caleb Martin and Haywood Highsmith? And then do you just trust your program to spit out guys to make up for that? So it's not so much that I think the Heat, I probably overstated this at the beginning. They're in an unsettling spot, but it's not because I think that they need to make this big trade. I just think at bare minimum, you'd like to be able to run it back. And personally, I would be fairly surprised unless they're cutting costs by trading a Duncan Robinson or removing a Terry Rozier. If both Haywood Highsmith and Martin specifically are back.
It does seem like Martin is, I mean, he's someone that like, if you're talking mid-level, like, sure. I think a lot of teams would be happy to give Caleb Martin the mid-level as like a starting point.
The Heat should be one of them, by the way, even though they could re-sign him for that amount. I was going to, do you have anything else on just like the state of the team is the state of the team? I was going to get into some of their targets to see what you thought. So again, free agency, I'm only planning on minimums. Chris Paul, would that interest you if he gets waived by the Warriors and he's just willing to, hey, we'll let you start and you'll get to dominate the ball here?
100%. Because that we didn't even really talk about, like, this is a team whose offense just chronically is behind its defense and it always rears its head. Like if the Heat have had a consistent problem, it's like they get to the playoffs and it's like, God, unless Jimmy Butler is Superman, we just don't score,
Chris Dunn, Dennis Smith Jr. not really going to help your offense, but some defensive tools. If Josh Okogie ends up on the market, like that could be a fun rehab project for the Heat. Taurean Prince, if he's available for the minimum, certainly. Javonte Green, Joe Ingles has that team option with Orlando. I'm curious to see what happens there. Are there any free agents that spring to mind, or should I list off some of the trade guys I have for them?
Why don't you go to the trade guys?
So Donovan Mitchell, if he hasn't signed the extension, that's there. Trae Young, these are so complicated because the Heat in theory can't, unless they're going to finish beneath, like if you aggregate salaries, you're going to need to finish beneath that second apron. And if you take back more money than you're sending out, you need to finish below the first apron. Those guys are tough for that. I have Isaiah Stewart. Ayo Dosunmu would be fantastic in Miami. Denny Avdia, of course. Keldon Johnson, I thought would be an interesting flyer. I don't know if he's a good enough shooter at this point. Tamani Kamara, if you're going to lose Caleb Martin, if you lose Haywood Highsmith, he's just so cheap. What does Portland want for him? I would look at DeJounte Murray if I'm this team, if you're kind of bracing for Jimmy Butler regression. And then also Bogdan Bogdanović would be a great fit here. Isaiah Stewart, because they do need a front court partner for Bam. I still think, like, I know Kevin Love is nice and you can play Jimmy or Caleb, but like all these different guys at the four, Jaime Jaquez, of course, Nikola Jovic. I wanted to ask you about this guy, and you could talk about anyone else that you wanted to as well. They have like Larry Markkanen's the perfect salary fit for them because we'll just send out Terry Rozier or Duncan Robinson, and or if Utah wants Tyler Hero for some reason, could they theoretically, you think, overwhelm the Jazz with an offer enough to even make them think about it, looking at how many picks they owe?
I think if OKC and some other teams are sitting it out, they could. But I just like it's hard for the Heat to have the best offer.
I will say they put Jaime Jaquez on the table.
That gets interesting
because it's like OKC's probably not sending back a top tier prospect for Larry Markkinen. No other, like, what team is, you're not even getting a Herb Jones or a Trey Murphy from New Orleans
No.
for Larry Markkinen.
You might get Case and Wallace, maybe. I don't know
Okay.
from OKC, but and like he's at least there's a conversation to be had between him and Hawkes for sure. Yeah, I think. I mean, I think Markkinen's someone that like find me the team that I don't think he's going to help, which is weird because like he does have deficiencies. Like he's not a great defender. Like he's got length, but he's not like.
But he's held up against threes.
Yeah, like so. Would the Heat be better with him? Like absolutely. Would they be better with him instead of Duncan Robinson, Hawkes, and I don't know, a first or a few first? Like, yeah, probably. But then I don't know. Like I think Malcolm Brogdon was someone else I was thinking of. If you think he can stay healthy, that's another number you can pretty easily match.
But like you can't have like in that scenario. I like that target, but like you have to give up on a less likely Tyler Hero or Terry Rozier there because you can't just have those two plus Malcolm. Like we're sending another like guard type player to. Yes, he's more of a floor general than either of those two, but like at that point, it's why like we just so much money tied up in these non-wings.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think ultimately the most likely outcome is like basically everyone's back, and that includes Martin and maybe not Highsmith, and then they're just banking on Jovic and Hawkes being better and then just being healthier in general?
Yeah, I think the most likely outcome is one of the two you mentioned leaves, Martin or Highsmith, and then everyone else is back. That would be my guess.
I think I agree with that.
Which is, again, and they could still be better. So, but I do think they will be linked to, they have some of these salaries, but they have to, my final thought there would be like, okay, you can include multiple firsts and swaps. You do have Hawkes and Jovic. Like if you're going to make this trade, it has to be super specific in the sense of there have to be other teams sitting it out because you're never going to have the best offer at this point. And because of the apron stuff, it's so you either need to make sure you're taking back less money. Either way, you need to finish beneath the second apron because you're going to need to aggregate salaries to do it. But you also, like, if you're going to take back more money, then you have to finish beneath, like, that's going to make it even harder. You have to finish beneath the first apron. So that is the challenge of them making a big move right now.
I just think, like, as a macro thought, the Heat, and we talk about a lot of other teams before the Heat when we're talking about, like, oh, look what's going to happen with the new CBA. Like, imagine the position Miami would be in under the old CBA right now. All these mid-tier salaries they have to trade. Like, it would be so easy to act like they would easily be in the mix for stars. But it's just like you gotta. It's just a way harder thing to do now with the first and second aprons and the rules those impose on you. Because otherwise, it's like we're talking about them as like being pretty inflexible. That would absolutely not be the case if we were under the old CBA. And that's just, that's the new reality.
As a final note, I think they can include 3 swaps and 2 first-round picks in any trade. And I think both of those first-round picks would technically be conditional upon the obligations they have to. They sent the 2027 pick to Charlotte when they got Terry Rozier, and then they have their 2025 pick going to OKC. So like they would still be conditional, but you could in theory offer 2 first-round picks and 3 swaps. And we'll see what that would get them. This next team is like might be for me the most most fascinating team of the offseason.
Yeah, they need some time here. So it's the Orlando Magic. Free agents real quickly. There's a non-guarantee on Jonathan Isaac's deal. So technically not a free agent. Markelle Fultz, Gary Harris. Your guy Chuma Okeke is restricted. The previous 2 are unrestricted.
My God.
Goga Batadze, unrestricted. I think that's the relevant guys here. So their salary cap situation, like how long you got, basically they are among the major cap space teams. I think you could peg the number anywhere in the 30 to 40 million. I think 42 is kind of the high end. If I'm looking at the numbers correctly. But that,
you like how I have it phrased on our cheat sheet?
I didn't look at it. What do you have?
When it asks for what money are they like working with, it's just called choose your own adventure cap sheet. Like that's basically, they could have over 60 if they want.
Yeah. And like, maybe they will. The 42 million and change assumes basically the guys I mentioned, Fultz, Harris, Okeke, and Batadze are just not back. It assumes those guys are gone. How are they getting to all the way up to the 60? Is that Jonathan Isaac gets no?
Yeah, that's how you get to the 60. So we know they're going to blow that. I have them. So if you guarantee J.I., Caleb Houston, pick up Wagner's team option, Mo Wagner, that is, keep the number 18 pick, and then I actually had them re-signing Gary Harris for identical money at 13 million. So you're getting rid of Joe Ingles in that scenario, Markelle Fultz. you're still just like over 30 million there. And I don't
Yeah.
know that they need more than that.
Well,
Like,
yeah, that's one of the biggest questions here. Then their best spending tool, choose your own adventure. I think that's right. Maybe before we get to that, extension eligibilities. It's time. Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs
yeah, so
already.
let's cover those one by one.
Okay,
You want
Franz.
to, what are their maxes?
So 4 years, 173.7, or 5 and 224. So we'll call it 4, 174, or 5, 225.
Are you maxing? So I'm just going to get this up. I'm not giving Franz Wagner the max. If he wants it, he's got to wait.
I definitely wouldn't do the 5. I would be. So if you're at 4 years, your average annual value is still up over 40 million for him.
I know the cap is going up, but I don't know. His shooting season made me uneasy. I got into this with Grace Jean a little bit. I think she ultimately ended, and she might have sold me on just giving him the max. But I'm making him wait at this point. If he wants the max, he could wait.
I increasingly that's my thought too. Unless it's I think someone like Scotty Barnes, for comparison's sake, yeah, you probably got to do that. He's rookie of the year. He's. I think Barnes is like the level where you just
He's
do
your
it.
tentpole guy. Franz is not. It's Paolo.
Right. Right. So I'm increasingly kind of getting into the idea of restricted free agency is still a real powerful weapon for a team. And so as long as you're the player that you're going to allow to hit free agency is not going to get bent out of shape over it. And I think it's probably worth it in most cases to just let it go. Let it get to that point.
You can frame it as we want your lower cap hold because maybe they don't use all their cap space this season and they're trying to roll some of it over. But if you extend Franz and that number is just on your books for the max, that obliterates a lot of possibilities. But it would, if you told me they extended Franz, I would think it's more likely then that they did something seismic this offseason. So I might be more on board with it at that point.
But in a vacuum, the max seems like a lot for him.
I'm making him kind of prove it, but I'm framing it as we just want your lower cap hold. We don't know what's going to happen next summer.
Yeah.
I will say, I feel like it's, I guess if the number's so low for Jalen Suggs, you would have to do it. But I kind of feel like for Suggs, it's if Franz doesn't get an extension, he's not getting an extension. And then if Franz gets one, it increases the chances that he gets one because they've already fucked with their books for next year.
Yeah, it's if you could get Suggs for 4 at 100, I think it's okay, yeah.
That was the number I was gonna say. If it's 25 million, done. You want 5 and 125, take it.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. But other than that, yeah, I'm open to just letting it ride for another year and seeing. Because we think the Magic have a bright future, but it's what's the harm in one more year of information?
Right, but I will say though, if Jalen Suggs comes in, I think it's more of a discussion with Wagner. Clearly, if Jalen Suggs comes in and demands the max, then it's okay. Wait, but if you go, and that's what we're going to get into now, and you do stuff and you use your cap space, you make trades, you sign guys, you might as well just extend these two to build up the goodwill because you're not going to have that money to spend next year anyway. Again, unless you have all these placeholder deals in place. And so there might be some value in building up that goodwill, but if that requires maxing out Jalen Suggs, as much as I love Jalen Suggs, no, I'm not maxing out Jalen Suggs.
Yeah, right. I agree. Wendell Carter is also eligible for an extension, but it's kind of funky. Basically, your number here, you've got 3 years and 67.8 million. Because he's below the average salary in terms of
ballpark. Because I forgot his deal declines, and so I went the 140% route, and I was like, that's really low. And I was like, oh shit, he's gonna be at 10.9 million in the final year of his deal, so he's gonna be extending off the league's average annual salary. So even if the mid level that year is in the 15s, so the annual salary, the average salary is normally lower than that. So I think I threw in 13 or 14 million. I would offer that extension.
That his deal was really good when he signed it, and it's not like he blew the doors off, and it somehow still got even better because of it's one of the best friendly deals in the league.
% of the salary cap or something in the final year of that deal. That's bonkers.
He's a quality starting center. That could still get better. It's I don't know who his agent is, but you maybe should have gotten a little more for that. All right, that's those are our extension candidates. I mean, their needs are. This is the 22nd ranked offense. The defense is awesome. They get a ton of offensive production out of their forward spots and a facilitation, more than most teams do between Banchero and Wagner. There needs to be offense in the backcourt. And you can sort of, again, another choose your own adventure. Cause I believe everyone agrees that Suggs can just guard whoever he needs to guard 1, 2, 3. And so you can just get an offense only guy and hide him at one of the guard spots. So to me, that just is, there's other needs for sure. But
what's the bigger need to
you?
I'm noticing that I didn't update their needs for their sheet that we had. What's the bigger need to you? shoot. Obviously, they could be tied up in the same player. And by the way, they could do both. Like
Yeah.
they don't have to choose. But if they end up choosing, what's the bigger priority? Needs to be the bigger priority for this team? Getting in like a floor general, someone who's upgrading the Fultz, Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs floor general minutes, or just shooting.
I kind of think it's shooting. I don't feel like I could.
I disagree, but I think
okay.
like
No, I was gonna say I'm open to the other side of it. In my mind, I think, and maybe this will just be proved to be wrong, but between Suggs, Banchero, Wagner, and like if you get a little bit of facilitation from whoever you sign with like as a shooter / scorer, maybe it's enough. But yeah, like maybe it's not, and you're just never going to be a better than league average offense if you don't get someone to just run the show.
And so I'll frame it this way because I still think Anthony Simons is my favorite trade target for him. Where if that's the only move they made, that is where you convince me. Okay, they went the shot making route, but he does enough secondary passing
Right.
that it's fine. But if you were to choose, let's say it was, well, we can trade less to get Bogdan Bogdanovic from Atlanta, or we can get DeJounte Murray. I'm going the DeJounte Murray route because I think that the offense still kind of needs that organization. And if they disagree, I think that has to be a vote of confidence in Jalen Suggs more than anyone. Like we know what Paolo will evolve into, and you can count on Franz for some stuff, but it feels like that needs to be then a vote of confidence in Jalen Suggs' on-ball decision-making development, which again, he showed flashes, especially after he would grab rebounds last year, but him as the floor general, I don't know if that's how you maximize your offense.
Yeah, a lot of it, I think maybe fairly so, falls on Banchero if that's the route you go, where it's like you're just, in addition to probably having to be our leading scorer, you are also like you are the be all end all for us offensively.
He could be, but you still would like someone who's a plus passer at their position, or playmaker at their position. I don't know if Jalen Suggs will ever be that because I don't view Marcus Smart as a plus passer at his position. Do I view it for Derek White? So if he's like a supercharged Derek White, then you're fine.
Yeah.
Like those are kind of two different ends of the spectrums there.
Yeah, no, you're right. I really have been thinking about them more in terms of like, get them a 2, get them, and we can get into the targets a little bit too. Like, Simons for sure, but Simons is kind of combo-y, but like Buddy Hield, Klay Thompson, KCP, like look at that position as opposed to like, no, Suggs really isn't a 1. Like he just, right. So maybe it does, but wouldn't it be, I don't know. I would feel disappointed if it was Tyus Jones a little bit, just because
it would be Andy. Well, that's the question. How aggressive do you expect this team to be with their resources this summer? We've laid out the timeline where this could be not their last shot. They'll still have the flexibility to make trades. But in terms of having this caps flexibility, if you extend either one of Suggs or Franz, like this is your last chance then to have this type of flexibility.
Well, I think maybe you disagree that you just guarantee Isaac's salary. So that takes you out of the like ridiculous numbers and probably takes you out of max level guys in most cases because you're down in the 40s now.
Who would you want to? Well, I'll throw this name out. The one that I'm like, if they just wanted to get spicy, I'm going hard after Emmanuel quickly. And like, maybe Toronto ends up matching, then fuck up their payroll while you're at it.
He's kind of perfect. I hadn't thought about him at all, but he ticks do you need a 1 or a 2? And it's like, yes. And
done. Yes.
Like he's kind of
a little undersized at the 2, but like he fights defensively and he's not, I still think he has a long way to go as a live dribble passer, but like you saw it in Toronto a little bit, like getting better at maintaining his dribble. So like there's a pathway to him being not one of the maybe like when you're framing him as a floor general, will he be a top 15 playmaker starting? No, but because you have Banchero and even Suggs and Franz Wagner, you don't need that. You just need someone who's can be a game plus game manager. So that's the one where I'm like, because you said they might not have max money. I'm like, well, who are you going to max out anyway? And I'm like, you know what? I would throw the max at Emmanuel quickly or close to it and see what happens.
Yeah, no. And so like, I guess the move is putting that possibility aside. I think you're hoping to get 2 guys, right? You're hoping it's not just like one signing with, even if you're down at like 30 million, then I don't know. But if you're at 40 plus, that's maybe enough for Tyus Jones and like, I don't know, take your pick. Probably not KCP.
Like what?
But yeah, there's a lot of ways to go. I think like Gary Trent, like something like that. You could go get 2, which again would feel sort of underwhelming because it's like, it's got to be Simons. Or for a minute there was like, oh, it should be Monk. Or like Klay Thompson, I think is not a good choice there.
They could insulate him defensively better than most teams.
They could, but it's also like, yeah, maybe at the mid-level like number, like that makes sense for them.
Well,
But
and
he's just
they
too
could
old.
also just address it, be a hybrid of like, okay, we used some of our cap space on X, and then we went out, we traded some salaries to get Anthony Simons. What ends up being the better offseason for them? They get Emmanuel quickly, and then like Buddy Hield or Malik Beasley, or they get Anthony Simons, and then it's like, oh, we signed Monte Morris or Tyus Jones.
I mean, the first option sounds better to me, don't you think? I hadn't thought about it at all, and I've been trying to send Simons there forever. But quickly, you've just like introduced quickly into my orbit here, and I can't get it out of my head. So I'd go quickly and
There's so many
whatever
different.
healed.
They could also just create their own trade market. Like they should make an offer for LaMelo Ball. Like that would be. You talk about a team that like they're in transition a lot, but they're still kind of slow. Like the
Yeah,
semi transition stuff or the half court. It's weird. He'd be perfect there. I also asked. I'm not advocating for this because they should aim higher. I don't know what the state of his knees are. He's planning on playing, but like if Chicago's going to cheap out because they're Chicago and they just want Lonzo Ball's money off the books, and you're not going to sign Emmanuel quickly or spend a ton of money on one of the top players available. Like, do you consider like just like yeah, 1 year if we're potentially rolling over a cap space, like let's just if he's gonna play, why not try it?
the idea of a healthy Lonzo Ball helps every team. You know, like that. So it's 1 year left, and it's not a big number. Like I think it. If you can, if Chicago, well, first of all, Chicago's like, please take him. Like that's probably a red flag because they know more
Yeah,
about what's
fair.
going on than anybody.
They're probably a team that's too good to roll, like because you need to get. They're trying to make like if it was Detroit, if it's another team, if it's Charlotte, even like it
Yeah,
makes more sense to roll that dice. But for a team with immediate expectations, you probably shouldn't do it.
and like depending on where you are with your payroll, that might just be someone you can get on the buyout market at some point. Like
Right.
you know, as long as you don't get to, well, I forget now. I can't think about the rules for buyout guys, but you can't be in the tax or over the first apron or something. I can't even remember what it is, and sign someone that's making more than whatever. I don't know, the mid
Yeah,
level, the
more than
minimum.
the non-taxpayer mid-level,
Yeah.
but they might not have to worry about that. Just a couple other names very quickly I was thinking about. Darius Garland's a good enough shooter. I don't know if I like his playmaking and of course his finishing at the rim enough to say if he becomes available, go after him. I think you poke around because his value is probably lower than it's been.
Mhm.
Could you get Kobe White from Chicago?
I mean, yeah, if you're willing to like put some picks up, I think, but I imagine White is like, he should be one of Chicago's like most, untouchable guys.
I have Jaden Ivey listed here. I hate it, but I figured I would just throw it in there. The other two names, depending on the cost, if it's like a 2-year deal, I'm not ruling out D'Angelo Russell for this team.
Mhm. Yeah,
And then the other
stopgap.
one, the Bucks might be willing to break up their core. Like, if it's literally just Jonathan Isaac for Chris Middleton?
First of all, I love that for the Bucks, but yeah, probably because you're just dealing from a position of strength and banking on Isaac not staying healthy. But
And like
Middleton,
Middleton is, we're talking about secondary passers. He's on the same level as Simons
mhm.
of just like, no, he's not going to run the offense for you, but he can just run the pick and roll, basic pick and roll stuff. And then you lean on everybody else that you have. I thought about it and I love it. I would do it. I'm
Yeah,
not like, and if there has to be other stuff involved, you know what? I'm probably doing it anyway. So you could also just take Chris Middleton into cap space of the Bucks, but they're going to want players back.
yeah. Well, of course, like yeah, they're gonna need him. They can't get him any other way. All right, you want to go finish it out with Washington?
Yeah, they should be a quick team. Notable free agents, Tyus Jones. I'm very interested to see if they work out a sign and trade with him. Do they just pay him more to preserve the asset, or do they maybe let him walk? He is unrestricted. Their salary cap situation at a glance, they can have like the teensiest amount of cap space, but it'll be less than the non-taxpayer mid-level. So if you want to operate as an over the cap team by not just carrying Tyus Jones's hold, but you might as well just re-sign him, or if you want to keep Landry Shamet for some reason, you're probably just better off having a salary, like an additional salary slot to trade. Best betting tool, I think, will be the non-taxpayer MLE, though, again, if they like caps lock pay Tyus, that could change a little bit. Corey Kispert is really their only notable extension eligible candidate. I'd be curious, what would you give him? Like if he just said, I will sign for 3 years and 40 million.
I mean, that's on the high end, I think, probably for me.
Oh, I would do it. I think I would do it. Um,
I'm trying
and
to,
then
yeah.
biggest needs, they are what you would call the general talent infusion team. But I do think the two areas that stand out more than anything is we need and maybe it sounds like they're going to end up with Alex Sarr in the draft, but who knows? But they need a big man of the future and like kind of a floor general of the future. So if you're going to take stabs in free agency or trades, that's what I would be focusing on. And that's probably justified. I mean, like all their questions are the same. It's what happens with Tyus Jones. Let's do this. Let's do quick hitter questions on them. Is Tyus Jones in Washington next season?
I think he is, but he's there to be traded.
I kind of feel like he's going to be in San Antonio.
I hope so. That'd be great. I want him there for the Spurs.
Will Kyle Kuzma be moved before the start of the season? Not the trade deadline, before the start of the season.
This is maybe qualifies as bold, but I think so because I just think he's gettable. I think he's a guy that fits that position that a ton of good teams need. So like if you can find a way to get to that number, which is only 23 and change next year, like that, I think he's someone
and it goes down.
Right. Yeah. You got to move him. And I think you get 2 firsts, depending on like how bad the money coming back is for him.
And then Denny Avdia, do you think I think teams are going to lust after him. Do you think they view him on the same level as Bilal and whoever they're going to draft at 2 this year?
I think that they should. And I hope that they do.
I feel like he's going to be in Washington. Like if he's not, it's because someone went.
The Thunder offered 3 good firsts or something,
and then the Bulls will be looking like, oh, we couldn't have gotten one of those in the Alex Caruso trade. Or
they're going to be asking that question a lot.
So looking at like from a talent perspective, they're just like, what are you doing? They're a team. So I'm afraid that like you can't trade your own picks. You're not like super pick positive. So like you're not really taking like Walker Kessler would be a good example of someone who'd be great for this team. I'm Washington, and maybe they might end up with Alex Sarr anyway. I'm not trading a first round pick for anybody.
No, I think this will be boring, but I think this just needs to be, what's your worst contract, Team X? We will take it. Here's Kyle Kuzma or whatever else. We need the picks with it. Like so their like targets are just different. It's almost like it's like bizarro targets, like anti-targets. It's like who's out there that teams don't want that can give us stuff with them. Cause this team is like, depending on how you feel about Koulibaly or Avdia, even if you're super optimistic about both, they don't have someone that rates as a true cornerstone. And even if they draft Sarr, I don't think anyone views him that way either. So you just need, this is the team I just banged the drum on, like get as many 25 firsts as possible. Hope you get Cooper Flag. If you don't, just like continue to pile these picks up, take on all the bad money you can. This is like, you start building this team in like 2026, I think. And you're just hoarding shit until then. That's how I view it.
And I do I still want them to kind of open up. I don't know how many of their flyers in theory will actually stick from last year, but like, I still want to see more of Justin Champagny, Jules Bernard. I actually was kind of intrigued by Tristan Vukcevic. So like those are names where you don't want to necessarily crib too much playing time from them by going out. And even if you could get someone who just helps you immediately, I would take, again, even if you're getting Alex Sarr, I'm taking some stabs in the dark in free agency, unless you're really worried about, well, we don't want to hard cap ourselves to anything by using the mid-level exception, but just trying out a Markelle Fultz or DeAnthony Melton. Is Jalen Smith going to be a free agent? Get some stretch in the, kind of like the big man spot. Super like now you're taking flyers. Precious Achua feels like the Knicks might have to let him walk, even though he's restricted. I guess that changes if they lose Hartenstein. Luka Garza, I'd try out Kyra Lewis, a speed demon. Mamu Skelly in San Antonio is a free agent. I still love if you could trade for like Jaden Hardy or Aaron Wiggins, like to fill, like those are teams that might want Kyle Kuzma, by the way.
I love Jaden Hardy as a piece back from Dallas. If you get Kuzma sent that way, I think I'm higher than most on Hardy, and he hasn't helped me out too much, but I believe still
they should be a team. Like, I don't know what Phoenix would want of theirs, but if you're going to give us number 22, we will take on Yusuf Nurkic money. And do you want Kyle Kuzma? That they can't do that. So salary structure probably doesn't work there. But those are the things like Duop Reith. Like you have Ayton and Robert Williams III in Portland. Like, could we maybe get some Duop Reith in here? Isaiah Jackson, he's extension eligible, but Indy has Pascal, might have Jalen Smith. Like, where does he sort of factor in? And Miles Turner, of course, where does he factor in? Those are just sort of the names like I would take stabs at on the trade market that I don't think would cost them first round equity to get.
Yeah. Hey, Suns, pump up Royce O'Neal's number to exactly Kyle Kuzma's number. Draft number 22, and we'll wait until we
trade. The problem with that is just like there's a chance you just make yourself worse defensively and as a shooting team just because Kyle Kuzma is iffy there. So, but that's what I'm waiting for. Is I need the number from one of these second apron teams or one of their own free agents to just match, just someone like Kyle Kuzma's salary. You're just like something ridiculous.
Do we do an emergency? Do we pledge to do an emergency pod when some bizarre number is agreed to? It's like, oh, that's the one.
Honestly, I think that the answer to that question is on you. You know, I will be absolutely
Yeah, right. You'll do
you
a solo
right
pod
now.
no matter what. It's just on me to be there.
Who's the candidate? It is Royce O'Neal, right? Is the most likely candidate to look back on. Like, why
100%.
does his number match up perfectly with Kyle Kuzma?
Right. Yeah. That's weird. All right. Banner.
I feel bad that we didn't spend a ton of time, but like they're in the infancy. I like what they're doing from the front office and coaching perspective for the most part. Like I said, I think they might have found some of the names I listed before, some of those like intriguing flyers that are worth further exploration. But if Tyus Jones leaves, assuming they're going to get Alex Sarr, like you like take some dice rolls on some just like point guard types.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's going to cover it. Our final division. The look-aheads are complete. This will all be useless after the draft. No, I mean, hopefully this will hold up for a little bit, because we didn't talk.
Start until Sunday. Technically, a lot of it will hold up for, especially with teams like this where we talk mostly trade scenarios.
Yeah, true. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching. Make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing, responding to prompt questions now because we're engaging with you. Dan is getting it done. So yeah, do that. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. If you want to get in our Discord, the links for that in YouTube and podcast description, same place you can find information on our merch. That's going to do it. End of the offseason look-aheads for now, until we get more in depth later. Enjoy the draft, if depending on when you're listening to this, and shouts Frank Ntilikina, apologies Jared Allen.